She was a master of seduction, a spy trained to infiltrate the most impenetrable organizations. For years, she lived a double life, gaining the trust of a notorious assassin, the very man she was sent to destroy. Her mission was clear: uncover his secrets, report his every move, and bring down the most wanted hitman in the underworld. But everything changed the night her cover was blown. That night, the assassin, Minoru, returned home after a mission and greeted our protagonist, Ray, with a kiss on the forehead, apologizing for coming home late. Ray welcomed him back and asked about his mission, but Minoru dodged her questions and acted like she said nothing. This annoyed Ray, and she started complaining that he never gave her a straight answer. But out of nowhere, Minoru hugged her from behind, startling her. He told her that she was actually the one hiding secrets. Ray started to panic and tried to brush it off, but Minoru kept going, letting her know that he already knew the truth about her. Leaning in close, Minoru suddenly whispered in her ear, telling her that Ray wasn't even her real name. He then revealed her true identity, Miss Hero Naniko. Minoru didn't stop there. He pulled out a pocket knife and revealed that he already knew she was a spy. It was at that moment that Ray, now known as Naniko, realized she had completely failed in her mission. Minoru pushed her down onto the bed and told her not to move. Naniko was terrified, thinking he might hurt her, but Minoru calmly said he wasn't going to do anything bad. Nervously, Naniko stammered and asked when he'd found out she was a spy. Minoru told her he'd known for a long time. Thinking this was the end for her, Naniko started to say her last prayer silently, but then she noticed something odd. Lying there helpless, Naniko realized Minoru wasn't tying her up or anything of the sort. That only made her more anxious. Was he planning to torture her later? She figured her best chance was to escape. But as she tried to break free, Minoru gently covered her eyes and told her that resisting was pointless. He ordered her to give up and then whispered goodnight in her ear. Naniko braced herself, thinking this was truly the end. When morning came, Naniko woke up to find herself in Minoru's arms. He greeted her like nothing was wrong, which startled her so much she nearly fell off the bed. Minoru, noticing, asked if she was all right and patted her head before telling her to join him in the living room. As he walked off, saying he needed some coffee, Naniko stayed on the bed, completely confused about why she was still alive. She even wondered if everything from the night before had just been a bad dream. When Naniko finally went to the living room, Minoru pulled out his knife again and told her to come closer. Naniko was sure this time it was the end for her. But to her surprise, instead of ending her, Minoru had actually made her a 5-star meal. She cautiously tried the food and was blown away by how good it was. She complimented his cooking, and Minoru looked honestly happy to hear it. As Naniko ate, she kept a close eye on Minoru, wondering what he was up to now that he knew her secret. She couldn't figure out why he was acting so friendly and feeding her like nothing had happened. Still, she decided there was no way she was going to let Minoru win her over that easily. After the main course, Minoru smiled and offered to make her some French toast and ice cream for dessert. Getting annoyed by his unexpected friendly behavior, Naniko started to wonder if Minoru was trying to act like her perfect boyfriend or something. She called him by his name and asked if he'd always been this good at cooking. That's when the assassin casually dropped a bombshell. He said Minoru wasn't even his real name, and the person she'd been sent to spy on never actually existed. When Naniko heard this, she was furious. She shouted that their whole relationship had just been a silly game between two people pretending to be someone else. She mentioned her intelligence report, which claimed he liked airheaded girls, and demanded to know if that was fake, too. Minoru apologized and admitted that it was all a lie. Naniko was crushed. She couldn't believe that all the information she'd carefully collected turned out to be useless. Seeing how upset she was, Minoru tried to encourage her. He told her she was on the right track and that these experiences would help her do better in future missions. But Naniko admitted she couldn't afford to mess up. She explained, through a quick flashback, that she'd grown up with no family, and being a spy was her whole reason for living. Failing this mission meant going back to the association, which would be nothing but torture. For her, there was no such thing as next time. With a sad look, Naniko said there was no point in feeling sorry for herself since Minoru was going to murder her anyway, but even then, she didn't regret anything. Suddenly, Minoru did something completely unexpected. He got down on one knee. Stunned, Naniko asked what he was doing, but Minoru just took her hand and, without a word, proposed to her, saying he wanted her to be his wife. Completely stunned, Naniko demanded to know what Minoru was talking about. Minoru told her to think it over, then explained that if she went back to the association without any useful intel on him, they'd probably get rid of her without a second thought. Minoru then revealed that there was a way to keep her safe. She should become his wife. By marrying him, Minoru explained, she could tell the association that she'd succeeded in getting him to agree to an engagement, or what they called a marriage contract. With that, Minoru called Naniko his little spy and asked what she thought about his offer. Before she could answer, he reminded her that this was really her only option. Naniko hesitated, then nervously asked if his proposal wasn't even scarier than dying. Minoru looked at her with a cold stare, wondering if she was planning something else. To be sure she wasn't hiding any more weapons, Minoru suddenly reached for the band on Naniko's thigh, which caught her off guard. He pulled her closer and told her to take the thigh band off. Still confused, Naniko asked him why he wanted her to do that. Later, as they walked to the clothing store, Minoru apologized for messing up Naniko's clothes earlier and admitted he probably scared her. But Naniko pressed him, asking which part was supposed to be scary. Minoru awkwardly explained that asking her to take off her thigh band, especially since they hadn't even kissed yet, was definitely crossing the line. Naniko replied that the reason they hadn't kissed was because she had decided not to do anything inappropriate while undercover. Even as a spy, she said she sometimes slipped up and did things that could ruin her cover. Minoru just patted her head, and when she asked why, he smiled and said it was a secret. When they arrived at the clothing store, Naniko came out of the changing room wearing a cute outfit and asked if it was really okay for her to pick something for herself. She explained that as a spy, she'd always worn clothes to match her target's taste, so choosing something for herself felt embarrassing and strange. But instead of responding, Minoru just took out his phone and started snapping pictures of her. Confused, Naniko asked if he was trying to use the photos to expose her. Minoru just said he was taking pictures because she looked way too cute and asked if that wasn't a good enough reason. Naniko was shocked and wondered if this assassin had finally lost his mind. Still, she gave in and said he could take pictures as long as he didn't do anything weird with them. Minoru thanked her, grabbed her hand and pulled her along, saying he wanted to see her try on more outfits. As they picked out more clothes together, Naniko started to feel like they were actually on a date. Once they finished shopping and headed to the register, the nosy cashier noticed them and asked Minoru if he was buying the clothes for his girlfriend. Naniko was about to explain they weren't a couple, but Minoru suddenly put his arm around her and announced that they were engaged and that Naniko was his beautiful wife. Flustered, Naniko quickly protested, reminding Minoru that she hadn't even agreed to marry him in the first place. But before she could say more, the cashier just smiled and told them to follow her. Curious, Naniko asked what was going on and was stunned when the cashier led them to a wedding dress that looked fit for a princess. The lady explained that it was a rare dress you didn't see in stores very often. Naniko was so taken by the beauty of the dress that she accidentally said out loud how gorgeous it was. Minoru noticed how amazed she looked and asked if she wanted to try it on. Still lost in thought, Naniko barely heard him. When Minoru repeated the question, she snapped out of it and told him to stop joking. Embarrassed, she quickly reminded him that they should just go pay for their things. Later that night, back at the skyscraper, Minoru was out while Naniko sat alone in the apartment, lounging on the couch. Lost in thought, she realized things hadn't really changed. She was still doing what she always did, taking care of Minoru's place during work hours, but deep down she was torn. Her loyalty to the association was strong, and she knew she couldn't just betray them, even if it didn't feel right anymore. Suddenly, an idea hit her. With Minoru gone, this was the perfect chance to dig up his secrets. She got up from the couch and hurried to the bedroom, searching through his drawers, hoping to at least find out his real name. But just as she was about to dig deeper, she paused. Her mind flashed back to the moment when Minoru had proposed to her. She quickly shook off the thought, reminding herself not to get distracted or go soft. Minoru was still the enemy, and Naniko figured the only reason he kept her alive was because she was useful to him. Even so, she couldn't understand why she was starting to hesitate or feel soft toward him. Suddenly, Minoru showed up behind her, his face and clothes stained with blood. He pressed his blade to Naniko's neck and asked what she was up to. Naniko nervously tried to answer, but his cold touch made her freeze in place. Just his icy presence was enough to make her feel like she couldn't breathe. As she stood there fidgeting in silence, Minoru told her she was being a bad girl. Shaking, Naniko looked into Minoru's eyes and suddenly realized something. She just couldn't resist this dangerous man. His eyes seemed bottomless, like a dark void, and whenever he looked at her, it felt like she was nothing more than his prey. Right then, Minoru grabbed her chin and leaned in, demanding to know what she was really up to. He called her by name, and Naniko stuttered as she confessed to betraying his trust. She admitted she'd been trying to find out his real name so she could report it back to the association. Shaking, she apologized and told him he could do whatever he wanted with her. Minoru stared at her with cold, blank eyes and asked if that was really what she'd been doing. Naniko's mind drifted. She thought about how miserable her life as a spy had been. She wished she could have been a normal girl, and if she hadn't been forced into this life, maybe things would have turned out differently. But now she realized those thoughts didn't matter anymore. But instead of hurting her for betraying his trust, Minoru pulled Naniko into a hug and told her his real name was Omi, but she could just call him Omi. Naniko was shocked by this. Omi saw her surprised face and started explaining how his name was written in kanji, but Naniko quickly stopped him, saying that wasn't what she meant. She wanted to know why she wasn't dead after everything, and why he would just tell her his real name after all she had done. Omi calmly replied that he would never hurt her, and even offered to let her keep working as a spy, as long as she agreed to marry him. Naniko sighed, shaking, and wondered if all her spying was pointless after all. Omi admitted that her mission might cause him a bit of trouble, but it could really help her gain favor with the association. Changing the subject, Naniko mentioned how cold Omi's hands had been earlier and asked if it was because he had murderous intent. But Omi simply said his hands were always cold because he was sensitive to the cold. Worried, Naniko asked to see his hands, and when she held them, she realized they were as cold as ice. Her concern grew, so she suggested they make some warm food to help him feel better. Instead of answering, Omi gently pressed her hand against his face and told her she was always so caring. Naniko blushed at his words. Omi went on to say her hands were really soft and warm, just like fresh bread. This made Naniko's face turn even redder from embarrassment, but Omi just smiled and told her he had a gift for her. The scene then shifted to a church. Omi walked in and saw Naniko standing there in a wedding dress, looking like a Disney princess. As he approached her, Naniko turned and asked why he always did things so suddenly. Omi wondered if he'd upset her. Naniko hesitated, then said she still couldn't fully trust him. She reminded him that he was still her enemy and the target she was sent to spy on. She explained that, for an undercover agent like her, wearing a wedding dress didn't really mean anything. Naniko admitted out loud that, even though she'd grown used to this kind of life, she'd always loved fairy tales like Cinderella. But now, standing in a wedding dress, she just felt foolish. She noticed Omi watching her closely and accused him of setting all this up just to trick her. But before she could finish, Omi suddenly kissed her. Naniko tried to pull away, but Omi held her tightly and continued to exchange his saliva with hers, not caring about any mouth infection. Finally, Omi pulled away and told Naniko how cute she was. He confessed how much he loved her and said he'd do anything just to see her adorable reactions. In that moment, Omi admitted that he had fallen for her a long time ago. He shared that he used to watch her struggle through strict diets for her missions, even though she loved food. He also mentioned how he'd seen her failed cooking attempts, and how disappointed she looked whenever the association ended up making the food for her. Even though he knew all her efforts were for her mission, Omi said he couldn't help but find Naniko too adorable to ignore. Because of that, he just wanted to know more about her. Looking right at her, Omi confessed again that he was madly in love with her. He said all he wanted was to spoil her, tease her, and always stay by her side. Caught up in the moment, Omi playfully bit Naniko's hair, but she quickly pushed his face away, blushing hard from embarrassment. Not backing off, Omi picked her up like a princess and joked that he was about to kidnap his cute Cinderella. And so, right there in the church, Omi and Naniko got married, becoming the sweetest and deadliest couple the world had ever seen. Afterwards, they returned to the apartment, and Naniko was surprised when Omi mentioned that they'd be living together. Seeing her reaction, Omi casually asked if they weren't already husband and wife. Naniko quickly reminded him it was only a marriage contract and said she wasn't comfortable living with an assassin. But Omi pointed out that, before all this, she had basically been living with him like they were married anyway. Naniko argued that she had never stayed overnight, even before her cover was blown. Omi calmly corrected her, saying she had spent the night once, but she shot back that it was only because she'd been paralyzed. Frustrated, Omi rested his hand on his chin and asked if she realized how suspicious it would look to the association if a married couple didn't live together. He explained that, even if they were married on paper, living apart would make the association suspicious. Omi also pointed out the benefits. Not only would she keep up her image as a loyal spy, but he could protect her at all times. He challenged her to think of a better plan. Naniko thought Omi was just trying to mess up her rhythm, so she decided she had to take back control. To do this, she put on a disguise and started spying on him, figuring that was the best way to find his weaknesses. Later, Naniko followed Omi into what looked like a sweet shop. She couldn't figure out why he was there and wondered if maybe he had a sweet tooth, or maybe it was just bait for his next target. Suddenly, she lost sight of him, only for Omi to suddenly pop up behind her, making her jump in surprise. When Omi asked if she needed help with her spying, Naniko embarrassingly admitted that she had been following him, but immediately blew her cover. But Omi just smiled and said he already knew she was there, which made Naniko wonder how he could always be so sharp. Curious, Naniko asked Omi why he bought the sweets and what they were for. To her surprise, Omi said they were actually for her. Naniko stared at the package in shock. Omi, noticing her confusion, asked if it wasn't the kind she wanted, then mentioned he had seen her looking it up on her laptop. Naniko could hardly believe it. In a quiet voice, she told Omi that no one had ever done something like this for her before, and it made her really happy that he cared. Omi smiled and said she was way too precious, then jokingly asked if he should buy the pastry chef too. Naniko just laughed and said that wouldn't be necessary. Changing the subject, Omi asked Naniko if she wanted to see his workplace. Naniko's spy instincts kicked in, and she reminded him that she was, after all, his spy. When Omi offered to give her a tour, Naniko hesitated, saying she couldn't just walk in and pretend to fit in. Omi agreed, but then grinned and said he just wanted to show off his beautiful wife. Without giving Naniko a chance to argue, Omi grabbed her hand and led her toward his office. Naniko felt uneasy. She knew that if anyone at his workplace found out her true identity, she was as good as dead meat. Still, she forced herself to stay calm, reminding herself she was a spy and needed to keep gathering information. They walked through a dark, sketchy alley and entered a building where a man greeted Omi, calling him boss. Another intimidating guy with a cigar started staring at Naniko and asked Omi if she was the one. Naniko was so scared by his look that she instinctively grabbed onto Omi's arm. The man, whose face was hard to see at first, came closer, asking to get a good look at her. Tears started to form in Naniko's eyes as she imagined him tossing her into the ocean. But then, the man suddenly smiled and said the rumors were true. She really was beautiful. Another guy waved her over to have a seat, and Naniko quickly realized she had misunderstood them. To her surprise, everyone welcomed her warmly. Even the girls came over and started chatting with her like she was already part of the group. Seeing that Naniko was fitting in just fine, Omi told her he needed to attend a meeting and left her there. The man who first seemed so scary looked impressed, amazed that Omi had managed to marry someone so gorgeous, even though he was always buried in work. Then he turned to Naniko and casually asked if she was a civilian. The sudden question caught Naniko off guard, and she hesitated before saying she was just an office worker. The man nodded, but then, out of nowhere, he pulled out a gun and pressed it to her head, coldly asking if she was a spy. Naniko started shaking, her heart dropping as she realized she might have just been caught. But right then, Omi rushed over, grabbed the gun out of the man's hand, and demanded to know if he'd lost his mind pointing a weapon at his woman. Naniko was shocked to hear Omi call her his woman. Omi then warned the guy not to ever mess with his wife again. Naniko stared at Omi, completely stunned by how protective he was being. Omi then pulled her into a hug and quietly apologized, saying he was sorry for leaving her alone and knew it must have been scary. Naniko looked up at him in surprise. He was still the same Omi she knew, but right now, his aura felt bold and protective. The guy quickly apologized, saying it was just a joke and the gun wasn't even loaded. Trying to lighten the mood, he grinned awkwardly and asked if they'd enjoyed their wedding night. Omi glared at him, then admitted, a bit embarrassed, that they hadn't had their wedding night yet. Naniko's eyes went wide at that. In her head, she was screaming that there hadn't even been a real wedding, let alone a wedding night. Soon after, as they were leaving the office, Omi apologized for how his coworker acted. Naniko shook her head and said it was okay, even though her heart was still pounding from what happened. Suddenly, it started pouring rain, so Omi took off his coat and held it over Naniko to keep her dry. When the rain got even heavier, Omi casually suggested they grab dinner and waited out. Naniko was surprised. Omi then slipped his arm around her waist, waiting for her answer, but Naniko got flustered, shook her head, and insisted she had to get home as soon as possible. When they finally got home, Naniko stepped out of the bathroom with her cheeks still red, trying to calm her nerves. She kept thinking about that wedding night comment from earlier and muttered to herself that this was just a contract marriage and that there was no such thing as a wedding night. Still, the thought kept bugging her. That's when she realized she didn't have any spare clothes to change into inside. Suddenly, the door swung open. Omi walked in like a boss, towel draped over his head, chest out, six-pack on full display. He called out to Naniko and casually let her know the hairdryer was free to use. Naniko's eyes went wide when she saw Omi's ripped body. Her heart was pounding a mile a minute. She tried to make a quick exit, but the door was locked. Flustered, she stammered out a question, asking if he planned to do anything weird. Omi just smirked, his voice cool and calm, and told her he didn't plan on doing anything cultured. He even offered to call her a taxi so she could get home safely. Feeling relieved, Naniko nodded. But as she reached for the hairdryer, Omi stopped her and insisted on drying her hair himself instead. Naniko reluctantly agreed. So with that, Omi's hands started moving gently through her hair, making her cheeks turn bright red. The warmth and softness of his touch surprised her, and she quietly admitted that it felt nice and that his hands were gentler than she expected. Suddenly, Omi paused and quietly apologized. Before Naniko could ask why, he leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper, and told her he wouldn't let her get away. Naniko's heart nearly jumped out of her chest as Omi gently pinned her to the bed and softly said that tonight would be their wedding night. Naniko froze, staring at him in shock as his words sank in. With a shaky voice, she reminded him that he'd promised nothing like this would happen. But Omi just leaned in even closer, a dark smirk on his face, and said plainly that all men were liars. The moment you show a weakness, he added, they'll jump at the chance to take advantage. Desperate, Naniko nervously protested, saying things like that weren't needed for their marriage contract. But Omi just laughed, sounding amused, and told her she was a terrible liar. With a sharp look in his eyes, he reminded her that they'd tricked plenty of people together, and now they had to make everything look as real as possible. Omi held her down gently, his eyes lingering on her as he commented on how pretty she was. Naniko froze, stunned by what he said. But Omi didn't stop there. He leaned in, kissed her neck, sending shockwaves through her whole body, and then softly whispered something about leaving a deep mark on her. Flustered and blushing, Naniko stammered out a question, asking why he was saying things like that. Her body felt hot, and she realized she couldn't resist his touch anymore. Her cheeks turned even redder as she nervously admitted that she had never done anything like this before. Just as Naniko was about to give in, Omi suddenly stopped, his face softening as he looked at her. She quickly asked him to wait, her voice shaky. To her surprise, Omi apologized and explained that he was only teasing her because she looked so cute. Naniko's eyes widened in disbelief when she heard this. Omi couldn't help but laugh at Naniko's stunned expression. With a playful smirk, he joked that she looked just like a newly adopted kitten, helpless and absolutely adorable. He hugged her gently, apologized once more for teasing her, and suggested they just forget about what happened and move on. But Naniko's shock quickly turned to anger and she glared at him, demanding that he let her go. Instead, Omi hugged her tightly, apologizing again, but mischievously added that he wasn't ready to let her go because he hadn't enjoyed her company fully yet. Her mouth fell open in disbelief as he continued his teasing antics. With how Omi hugged her and continued to tease her, Naniko quietly grumbled that being held like this felt like a plushie being squeezed by a dog twice her size. Omi gave her a curious look and asked what kind of dog she was talking about. Caught off guard, Naniko blushed and said, "A Doberman." Omi laughed, then asked if she was a fan of dogs. Naniko hesitated for a bit before admitting that she was. Omi lay his head on the pillow and, with a mischievous grin, asked if she'd call him a good boy if he became her pet. Naniko's jaw dropped. She stared at him, not sure if he was joking or serious. She told him he had to be messing around, but Omi shook his head and said he meant it. Getting up from the bed, he looked at her with honest eyes and confessed that he really wanted to be with her, living together, sleeping next to her, and sharing every day with her. Omi added that without her, his life might lose all its color. Then, with a gentler voice, he asked if she'd let him cook for her every day. He promised to make sure she always ate well and stayed healthy. Hearing his genuine words, Naniko's frustration faded away. Finally, she agreed, telling him she was okay with living together. Omi's eyes lit up with excitement as he double-checked if she was really serious. Naniko nodded, thinking to herself that living under the same roof would make spying on him a lot easier. And besides, bro cooking was off the chart. Super delicious. Now that everything was decided, Omi cheerfully suggested they should also share a bed. Naniko immediately shot that idea down, insisting they'd be sleeping in separate rooms. As she headed out, Omi couldn't resist teasing her, saying she could always sneak into his bed if she got lonely. Annoyed and embarrassed, Naniko grabbed a pillow and whacked him with it, calling him an idiot before storming out. The following morning, Naniko woke up to find a picture-perfect breakfast spread waiting for her. She stared in surprise as Omi greeted her with a big smile, telling her to eat up. But just as she was about to start, the sound of the doorbell made her jump. Naniko glanced at Omi, confused about who could be visiting so early. Omi calmly asked if she wanted to answer the door with him, and she agreed. Together, they opened it to find a strikingly handsome man, named Kanchai, who looked like he'd just stepped off a runway. The stranger greeted Naniko, casually calling her Miss Spy. Naniko froze, shocked that he knew her secret, then nervously demanded that he explain what he wanted and why he was there. Kanchai's sharp eyes locked with Naniko, prompting him to express his confusion over whether she living with Omi was due to some kind of scam or a secret mission. On their very first day living together, Naniko accidentally stumbled into trouble, which to her might prove that this whole cohabitation thing might have been a terrible idea. Turning to Omi, Naniko demanded to know who the heck Kanchai was. Omi admitted he wasn't sure, suggesting that Kanchai might be there to keep tabs on them. That made Naniko even more curious, wondering if she had really been that suspicious. Sensing the awkward tension, Omi switched things up and asked Naniko if she wanted to join him at work for the day. Naniko paused, caught off guard by his unexpected offer. Before Naniko could answer, Kanchai cut in with an icy tone, asking why Omi would even consider working with someone who was obviously a spy. Omi just smiled calmly and said that bringing Naniko along would actually make things look less shady. Turning to Naniko, Omi gave her a hopeful look and asked if she'd come with him for the day. Naniko hesitated, pointing out that she was already on everyone's radar. But Omi reassured her, saying that if they showed up as a normal couple, it would make things seem less suspicious. Naniko lowered her voice and pressed Omi, asking exactly what kind of work he was talking about. Omi leaned in close and whispered that all she had to do was stick by his side. If she wanted, she could even spy on him all day. He didn't mind. Hearing this, Naniko's eyes lit up at the chance, and she quickly agreed. Kanchai, realizing he couldn't change Omi's mind, reluctantly gave in but warned Naniko that he'd be watching her closely. But Omi just brushed off the supervisor's worries, telling him not to stress about it. Naniko, on the other hand, was secretly excited. This was her big chance to dig up the truth behind Omi's mysterious job. Later on, the three of them pulled up to a massive palace in a fancy limousine. Naniko was left speechless, completely blown away by the size and luxury of the place. The sheer size and elegance of the palace stunned Naniko. But what really caught her off guard was realizing that her marriage contract had made her look suspicious enough for them to send a watchdog to keep tabs on her. It hit her that whatever secrets she had about Omi must be pretty valuable if they were going this far. Naniko figured this might be her best shot yet to dig into their organization and finally get the answers she'd been chasing. But once they stepped inside the event hall, Naniko took a look around and quickly got confused. She started to wonder why they were even there in the first place, only to find out that Omi's entire job was just to serve as security for the event. Annoyed by the news, Naniko immediately scolded Omi for not telling her the truth beforehand. Omi just grinned, admitting that he figured she'd probably refuse to come along if she knew the real reason. Naniko's annoyance only got worse when she remembered that Omi had bought her a pricey new dress just for this event. She told him she'd pay him back when they got home, but Omi waved it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. Still, something about the whole event just felt off to Naniko, and she couldn't get rid of that uneasy feeling. Feeling uneasy, Naniko ended up blurting out her worries, but Omi totally dodged the topic. Instead, he showered her with compliments, saying the white dress made her look even more stunning, and teasing that it made her backside look extra thick. He kept going, calling her the most beautiful woman at the party and raving about how the dress made her skin glow. It was so over the top that Naniko could only stare at him in disbelief, not sure whether to be flattered or suspicious. Omi grinned slyly and said he was honestly happy she came to the event with him. All the compliments made Naniko blush. Flustered, she called him a dumb assassin, but Omi just grinned wider. He admitted he'd picked out that dress on purpose because he wanted to see her wearing it. Hearing this, Naniko's face turned even redder, and she struggled to hide her embarrassment. Right then, Kanchai, who'd been quietly watching them, commented on how nervous Naniko was, saying she really did act just like a newlywed wife around her husband. Omi couldn't help but laugh, which only made Naniko scold him for finding the situation funny. Omi apologized with a shrug, but Naniko held her ground, saying she was supposed to be playing the role of his wife, not a spy. Omi simply smiled and told her not to worry, promising to handle everything from here. Omi pointed at a nearby table filled with tasty-looking food and nudged Naniko to check it out. She looked over and admitted she'd always wanted to try that kind of food but hadn't gotten the chance before. Out of nowhere, Omi leaned in, told her to open up, and fed her a bite. Naniko was surprised and hesitated for a moment, but finally gave in and enjoyed it. When she said it tasted great, Omi was clearly happy and started eagerly telling her about other flavors, insisting she give those a try too. Omi kept feeding Naniko, which made her feel even more embarrassed. Eventually, Naniko spoke up, telling him she could eat by herself. Omi just smiled at her and pointed out that she had some cream on her face. Before Naniko could wipe it off, he leaned in and gently cleaned it for her, making her blush even more. While at it, his lustful gaze met hers, and for a second, Naniko found herself questioning if Omi had suddenly forgotten the reason he was at the event, and had chosen to preoccupy himself with satisfying his own desire to spoil her. Her face immediately reddened as the weight of the situation sank in. Deep down, Naniko had it in mind that if their sham of a marriage was discovered, it could cost her life. But inasmuch as what Omi was doing would make them look more like a couple, it was really embarrassing doing it in front of so many people. Naniko couldn't take it anymore. She burst out, telling Omi to cut it out and that he should save this kind of thing for when they were alone. Her face was burning red from embarrassment as she scolded him right there at the party, hoping he'd finally chill out with the public affection. Meanwhile, Kanchai, who was standing nearby, watched Naniko's awkward behavior with Omi very closely. He seemed extra interested, silently taking note of every little thing she did around her husband. When Kanchai couldn't hold back anymore, he asked Naniko if she and Omi were a normal couple before they got married. The question made Naniko anxious, but she forced a nervous answer, saying yes. At that moment, Naniko realized Kanchai was starting to get suspicious about everything. To make their marriage seem real, Naniko started flirting with Omi and even asked if he wanted a drink. Omi noticed how playful she was acting and totally misunderstood, thinking she was only behaving that way because Kanchai was around. Still, he decided to keep quiet and just watch what would happen. A little while later at the party, Naniko stepped out onto the balcony to get some air. She was feeling worn out by everything that was going on. She had tried so hard to convince Kanchai that she and Omi were actually a real couple, but it looked like he still wasn't buying it. So she decided to stop pretending for a while and just take a break. Suddenly, Omi showed up behind Naniko and quietly complained in her ear that she was giving Kanchai more attention than him. Naniko was startled by his sudden appearance and quickly scolded him for sneaking up on her when she was just trying to relax. When Naniko turned to face Omi, she noticed a strange expression on his face, prompting her to wonder if that was the look of jealousy. Before she could figure it out, Omi suddenly grabbed her by the waist and said that, since they were married, he just wanted her to focus more on him. With lustful eyes, Omi told Naniko that tonight he couldn't stop thinking about how beautiful she looked. He kissed her on the chest and begged her to forget about every other guy and pay attention only to him. Naniko was shocked. It was rare to see Omi this jealous, but she secretly thought it was kind of cute. Out of nowhere, a gunshot was fired in their direction. Omi reacted instantly, moving like a trained assassin. He grabbed Naniko by the waist and shielded her as the bullets smashed into the window behind them. Kanchai came running out to the balcony, asking if they were okay. Without waiting for an answer, Kanchai quickly told Omi that things were getting out of control inside and reminded him that their job was to handle the situation. Omi picked up Naniko and told Kanchai he understood. Omi set a scared Naniko down in a nearby garden and begged her to stay there and wait for him. He told her to call him right away if anything happened. Without wasting any time, Omi slipped on his black assassin gloves. Kanchai then tossed him a blade, which Omi caught in style. As Omi headed toward the castle entrance, he said it was time to get to work. Meanwhile, Naniko stayed hidden in the garden, terrified. The only question running through her scared mind was who these people were who attacked the venue. Could they have something to do with Omi's criminal organization? Curious, Naniko decided to sneak back up to the balcony for a better look. It was the perfect chance to spy on what was happening. From her new spot, she was surprised to see Omi fighting in a way she had never seen before. Not once during all their time they pretended to date. Omi took down every member of the rival group and was the only one left standing. Naniko's eyes went wide with shock. The Omi she was watching was nothing like the one she thought she knew. From her spot, she saw Omi stab one man on the ground, then move on to another. There was a wild look in his eyes like he was out for blood. In that moment, Omi looked more like a hungry predator enjoying the hunt. It was a total bloodbath, but even though she shouldn't have, Naniko found herself enjoying the scene. Watching how ruthless Omi was just now, Naniko finally realized that if Omi ever wanted to, he could have taken her out in an instant, without even breaking a sweat. A few minutes later, Omi appeared on the other side of the window and told Naniko that everything was finished. Smiling, he also mentioned that she had some leaves in her hair. Naniko was shocked to see him, but somehow his smile always made her feel calmer. When Naniko nervously asked about the men lying on the ground, Omi assured her that he hadn't sent them to their makers just yet. She took in his answer and realized how odd it was to be asking an assassin that kind of question. Omi then told her it was time to go, and Naniko quickly followed him toward the exit. But then, one of the wounded men on the ground suddenly grabbed a gun and fired at them. Omi reacted instantly, jumping in front of Naniko to protect her from the bullet. Naniko was frozen in shock, barely able to process what just happened. She saw that Omi had been shot while saving her, and she was so stunned she couldn't even speak. Before the attacker could shoot again, Omi quickly fought back and shot the guy in the chest. With the danger eliminated, Omi managed to apologize, even though he was clearly shaken. Trying to sound calm, he asked Naniko if she was okay or scared. But Naniko, still nervous as hell by what she had just witnessed, reminded him that he was the one they should be concerned about, pointing out the gunshot wound to his stomach. But Omi brushed off her worry, saying the wound was just a scratch. He led her to a nearby limo and told her to leave, explaining that he needed to stick around and deal with the rival gang. Naniko was more worried about him and wanted to stay and help, but Omi firmly told her to go home for his sake. He said he cared more about her safety and promised he'd come back to her soon. As Naniko sat in the car, her heart was heavy with worry for Omi. His injury looked serious, and even though their marriage was just a contract, the thought of him dying made her feel uneasy. As a spy, she knew she wasn't supposed to care if he lived or not, but deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She couldn't stop worrying about him. The way he protected her from the rival gang kept replaying in her mind. Deep down, she knew that if she hadn't been there, Omi could have avoided getting shot. She felt like his injury was her fault. Naniko wondered what she would do if Omi didn't come back. The thought bothered her, but all she could do now was wait. She realized she hadn't even thanked him for saving her, but told herself that if he came back, she'd make sure to thank him right away. Suddenly, the car stopped, and Naniko stepped out into the rain. She saw a man in a black suit holding a black umbrella and immediately thought it was Omi coming toward her. She felt a wave of relief and hurried over to ask about his injury, but stopped when she realized it wasn't Omi. It was Kanchai. With a cold look on his face, Kanchai walked up to her and said he was glad she was finally alone. He grabbed her and pressed a gun to her neck. In a low, threatening voice, he accused Naniko of trying to take out Omi during the chaos. Naniko tried to speak but couldn't find the words. Kanchai went on, telling her that, just like he planned, he was now going to get rid of her. Kanchai's voice grew even colder as he called her Miss Spy and told her to confess her real objectives. He said if she did, he might actually let her live. Kanchai kidnapped Naniko and locked her inside Omi's apartment. But Naniko couldn't stop wondering about his real reason for taking her. If she was really his target, why bring her back to this place? She also noticed he hadn't tied her up, probably because he knew she couldn't win against him in a fight. Naniko gathered her courage and finally asked Kanchai why he had kidnapped her. Kanchai answered coldly, saying his plan was to get rid of both her and Omi to make sure their organization's secrets stayed safe. He explained that she had become a problem, and even though he was sure Naniko was a spy, the bigger issue was that Omi was going soft on her and acting like a useless simp. So he would just have to deal with them both. Naniko immediately denied being a spy, but Kanchai still didn't believe her. He pointed out that she had said that before, but her actions always seemed suspicious. He told her that his gut feeling was still warning him that she was a spy. But then Kanchai offered Naniko a deal. He said that if she told him everything she knew, he might let her go. Kanchai demanded that Naniko share information about the group she worked for and explain why she was after Omi. He promised not to shoot her if she talked, but warned her seriously that if she kept quiet, she would see Heaven's Gate in a matter of seconds. With Kanchai's gun aimed at her head, Naniko's mind was spinning. She wondered if he would really let her live even if she told him everything. But if she gave up her organization's secrets, she'd also be betraying Omi, who had just risked his life to save her. Naniko knew that either choice was bad for her. She was frozen with fear, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, someone walked into the apartment, calling out for Naniko. She turned and saw it was Omi. Kanchai quickly stood up and moved toward Omi, planning to finish him off, ignoring Naniko's desperate cries for him to stop. Kanchai told her this was the perfect chance to take out Omi while he was weak, and coldly added that she would be next. Fearing for Omi's life, Naniko shouted for him to run. But to her utter surprise, Kanchai just greeted Omi instead of attacking. Naniko was completely stunned, her eyes wide with confusion, wondering what in the Tyler Perry was going on. Omi walked in and casually told Naniko he was home, while Kanchai playfully smacked him on the head, scolding him for taking so long to show up. Naniko stared at the two of them in disbelief and told Kanchai he shouldn't be hitting someone who was already hurt. Raising her voice, she demanded to know if Kanchai planned to get rid of them now that they were both there. But Omi tried to calm her down with a gentle voice. Then he dropped a surprise. He said Kanchai's real name was Setsu Tsukihi and explained that he had actually asked Setsu to protect her. Now even more confused, Naniko confronted Kanchai, now called Setsu, about all the threats he'd made earlier. But Setsu just shrugged and admitted he was lying. Omi asked if Setsu had bothered Naniko, and Setsu said he hadn't, but admitted he was still suspicious of her. Setsu told Omi that Naniko had refused to reveal anything, even after he promised not to hurt her if she talked. Omi felt proud when he heard this and suddenly wrapped his arm around Naniko's waist. Proudly, he declared that his beautiful wife was just a regular girl after all. Embarrassed, Naniko instinctively pushed Omi slightly to free herself from his grip. But when she remembered that Setsu was nearby, studying their body reaction, she regretted it. Setsu immediately got angry, grabbed Omi by the collar, and asked if he was sure Naniko wasn't cheating on him. He teased Omi, calling him a workaholic who had rushed into marrying an idiotic office worker who might even be a spy. Naniko stood there in shock as Setsu kept ranting, asking if she was making Omi buy her expensive stuff or sending money overseas. Omi stayed quiet the whole time, which only made Setsu more annoyed. Trying to lighten the mood, Naniko asked Omi what kind of friendship he had with Setsu. Omi explained that Setsu was his childhood friend and co-worker who always helped him with missions. Naniko, surprised, then asked if the real reason Setsu had come to the house was because he thought Omi was being scammed. Before Omi could respond, Setsu confirmed it, saying he hadn't wanted his friend to be taken advantage of or become useless, since it would affect his job performance. Naniko started to get it, and asked if it would really have been a big problem. Setsu explained that because Omi was so easygoing, he would probably go along with anything. Even if Naniko was a spy, Omi might still accept her. But in the middle of the conversation, Naniko suddenly remembered that Omi still needed his wound treated and started to panic. Omi just laughed quietly, while Setsu pointed out that Omi hadn't complained about the pain at all. Setsu said he would go find a doctor, but made it clear he was still suspicious of Naniko. Before leaving, Setsu handed Naniko a bag. At first, Naniko was terrified, thinking it might be a bomb. But when she finally opened it, she was shocked to see it was just a wedding gift. Feeling touched, Naniko said that Setsu was actually a nice guy. Omi smiled and told her to try getting along with him. Just then, Omi winced in pain as his wound started to hurt and let out a groan. Naniko quickly helped him sit down and began to bandage his injury. As she worked, she joked that she was surprised he even had a friend, since he always acted like such a loner. She added that she had thought Setsu was just some stranger sent to keep an eye on her. Omi admitted that he was just playing along with Setsu, thinking it would be easier to convince her if she believed it was just a job. Naniko, tying off the bandage, gently suggested that Omi should stop acting cold towards Setsu and adopt a softer approach. Hearing this, Omi looked at her and softly declared that the only person he ever wanted to be affectionate towards was her. Naniko's cheeks instantly turned deep red as soon as those words left Omi's mouth, leaving her completely speechless. Naniko asked Omi what he meant by that, but then took a moment to thank him for saving her and apologized for the injury he got while protecting her. But Omi brushed it off and told her not to worry, saying he was used to getting hurt. Before Naniko could say anything else, Omi asked if she would give him a hug as a reward for saving her, saying it would help him feel better. Shocked, Naniko hesitated and started to walk away. But Omi quickly backtracked, saying it was just a joke and asked her not to leave. Naniko then stopped, held out her arms and said he could have a hug, but only this once. Omi lit up with excitement and opened his arms wide, leaving Naniko a bit stunned. She told him she'd rather hug him from behind, but Omi insisted he'd feel much better if she hugged him from the front and said she had to do it that way. Left with no other choice, Naniko reluctantly agreed. Naniko's face turned red, but she told herself it was okay to hug him this way. Omi wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close, making her even more nervous. Noticing how shy she was, Omi asked her to lift her head, and when she hesitated, he teased her, asking if she was refusing. In an innocent voice, he said he wouldn't be able to recover unless she gave him his reward. Her face got even redder, and she finally gave in to his request. Omi looked really happy and said he felt much better now. Naniko told him to stop saying weird things, but Omi joked that he might die from happiness. Embarrassed, she told him again to stop saying such strange things. When Omi mentioned he could hear her heartbeat, Naniko got flustered and snapped back that, of course, he could since he was so close to her. Omi agreed she was right, then kept complimenting her, which made Naniko feel even more awkward. Seeing how affectionate Omi was being, Naniko couldn't help but think about how strange it was. A spy like her being looked after by an assassin. Trying to keep her emotions in check, Naniko told him to sit still and wait for the doctor. Omi nodded and agreed. But then Omi questioned if he could ask her a question. Naniko hesitated for a bit before inquiring about the question. Omi leaned in close, whispering in her ear, asking if, when she shouted for him to run away earlier, she really meant to protect him. Naniko looked confused, not remembering when she said that, but Omi revealed that he had heard it when he entered. Omi also pointed out that, even when Setsu threatened her earlier, she hadn't given up any information. Naniko, surprised and embarrassed, explained that she was just panicking at the time and couldn't say anything. It wasn't because she was trying to be brave or anything like that. Omi nodded, lay back down, and remarked that since she still had spy work to do, she could always threaten him with a gun or worsen his injuries to interrogate him. He promised to respond to any question she asked. Naniko looked at him in confusion and asked what he was even talking about. Omi gently took her hand and said since he was weak, he wouldn't be able to stop her if she wanted to act like a real spy. He offered to divulge all the information her organization desperately wanted and asked if she would go through with it. Instead, Naniko worriedly apologized, acknowledging the immense pain he was in, and admitted that she couldn't bring herself to act like a spy in this situation. In the end, Naniko felt helpless and confessed that she had always felt lonely in her organization. She recognized that she was nothing more than a disposable pawn on the chessboard that could be easily replaced by her organization when she was no longer useful. In a society where everyone acted solely for their own benefit, she found herself shaken that someone had actually saved her life. It was new and unexpected for her. That was why she had thought of protecting him in that moment, and the very reason why she couldn't allow herself to let him die from his injury, even though he was her target. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, breaking the tension in the room. Naniko quickly got up, thinking it was the doctor, and insisted Omi needed help right away. But before she could open the door, Omi put his hand on hers to stop her. He surprised her by confessing that he loved her deeply. He told her she had no idea how much it meant to him that she opened up about her real feelings, and said she was being unfair to him. As the knocking got louder, Naniko kept insisting that Omi let the doctor treat his wound. But right then, Omi suddenly asked her something unexpected. He wanted to know if her troublesome boss had ever protected her. Surprised by his question, Naniko started telling Omi everything she knew about her boss, including the details she was supposed to find out about Omi's background and weaknesses. Then she asked him what he had done to make her organization target him. But instead of responding, Omi suddenly moved closer and planted his lips on hers. Naniko's face immediately turned crimson, stunned by the abrupt gesture. After the sudden kiss, Omi pulled back and proposed a deal. He said his hands might be dirty, but he had no choice but to force her into a marriage contract with him, even after knowing she was a spy, because he loved and cared about her too much. He called her his Cinderella, and then said he would reveal all his secrets to her, but only if she let him do whatever he wanted to do with her that night. Even though Naniko was supposed to be tied to Omi by a marriage contract, she was now caught up in a serious mess that she had never planned for. This was her big chance to finally get the important info she needed about Omi and his group. But it looked like the only way to get it was to let him have his way with her. Suddenly, Omi pinned Naniko to the door and leaned in for a kiss. She tried resisting, telling him to wait. But her effort was futile since Omi just continued kissing her, and while he was at it, she realized his body felt much warmer than before. She also realized that as much as she tried to resist, she just couldn't even if she wanted to. Her breathing started to grow shallow from the forced kiss, but fortunately, Omi stopped for a moment and called her a good girl. Naniko quickly told him he was being too rough, but Omi just said they should kiss even more. She stuttered and said no, clearly, refusing him. Still, she started to second-guess herself, wondering if saying no was the wrong move. Trying to calm things down, Naniko nervously suggested they could try again another time. But Omi was already lost in his own desires and pulled her even closer, grabbing onto her ginormous airbags. Naniko was stunned, and her face turned bright red. She told him his hands were somewhere they shouldn't be. Omi just smirked and said whatever he was holding felt extra big and soft. Feeling embarrassed, Naniko nervously protested, saying she didn't want to hear such comments. But then she noticed that his hands were cold and mentioned it. Omi suggested she warmed his hands with her body, but Naniko quietly begged him to let her go. But even as she resisted, she couldn't help but feel his body heat, despite the chill of his hands. Just then, Omi shifted the subject from Naniko's body to Naniko calling Setsu by his first name when they just met. But she never called him Omi, even though he was her husband. Naniko, trying to regain control of the situation, pointed out that he was being jealous again. However, her words did nothing to stop his actions. Omi just crushed her watermelons harder. Leaning in, he whispered something that sent shivers down her spine. He told her that someone was probably standing right outside the door, listening to everything. Then, with a sly grin, he asked if she wanted him to open the door and show that person exactly what was going on. Terrified, Naniko begged him not to do it. Instead, Omi gave her a playful bite on the neck, which made her blush hard. She pleaded with him to stop biting her, but he refused, saying he wanted to keep hearing the sweet sound she made. He asked why she smelled so sweet, admitting that it only made him want her more. Even though she tried to push him away, she couldn't hide the way her body reacted, and a quiet sound slipped out. Omi pressed in even closer, teasing her and asking how someone so innocent could ever be a spy. Holding her by the neck, he leaned in and whispered in her ear that from now on, he wouldn't let anyone else touch her. Naniko, a bit confused, asked him what he just said, but Omi brushed it off like it was nothing. Using the pause, she told him he was being scary and way too aggressive, which was surprising since he was usually so gentle with her. With a cold tone, Omi asked if she didn't know he could be a real bad guy when he wanted to. He unbuttoned his shirt, showing off his ripped body, and teased that her cute anger only made him want to mess with her more. Then he started taking off her clothes, which made Naniko panic. She begged him to stop and called out his name, trying to get him to pay attention as he kept tearing her clothes. Suddenly, the door swung open and Setsu walked in, calling them a pair of newlywed idiots. He gestured to the doctor standing behind him, who tried to cover his face so he wouldn't have to witness what was going on. Naniko's eyes went wide with shock when Setsu sarcastically asked Omi if Naniko was really trying to help by seducing him, or if she had something else in mind. Naniko got even more embarrassed when Omi quickly clarified that she had good intentions when she began seducing him. Naniko quickly cut in, denying everything and telling Omi he should just focus on resting. Then she excused herself. Omi apologized to the doctor, who also said sorry for walking in on them at such an awkward time. Once Naniko found a quiet spot in the apartment, she let out a small sigh of relief, feeling safe for the moment. But then she thought to herself, annoyed, that the earlier scene could have been the perfect chance to prove their marriage was real. She scolded herself for missing the opportunity and for acting dumb. Just then, Omi looked at her with a blank expression. He walked over, leaned in, and whispered something shocking in her ear. He told her they used to be in the same organization. Naniko froze, completely shocked. She tried to remember if she had ever heard his name before in her group, but nothing came to mind, which only made her more confused. Meanwhile, in an office somewhere else, a slim man in a black suit stood in front of a mysterious older man, giving his report. He told him that Naniko had made a contract with the assassin. The older man, hidden in the shadows, asked if that was really true. The man in the suit hesitated, then questioned why Naniko had even been picked for this mission. He pointed out that Naniko didn't have any major successes and was actually known for being a pretty bad spy. The aged boss didn't answer any of his questions, staying silent. The man in the black suit just sighed as he left the office, still wondering what the boss was planning. Once he was alone, the boss began looking through Omi's reports. After reading them over, he rested his hand on his chin and quietly said Naniko's name. The next day, Omi greeted Naniko with a big smile, but she just glared at him and pouted, clearly annoyed. Trying to break the ice, he asked if she wanted some coffee, but she turned away and refused. He tried again, offering tea this time, but she snapped that she had already said no. Omi soon realized Naniko was mad at him for what he'd done the day before. To make amends for his unruly behavior, Omi sat down next to Naniko, which made her jump. She turned to him, still looking really angry. Seeing her upset, Omi suddenly felt the urge to hug her. He thought she looked extra cute when she was mad. All he wanted was to pull her close and apologize. He took one look at her ear-like hairs and her chubby, soft cheeks and admitted to himself that he desperately wanted to touch them. Omi's hand started twitching on its own, so he grabbed the TV remote to stop himself. Naniko noticed and asked what the heck he was doing with it. Omi awkwardly explained that he needed to hold something so he wouldn't grab anything soft, so he used the remote to control himself. Naniko had no clue what the guy was going on about, but she quickly drew a line in the air with her hand, warning him not to cross it with his weird urges. Seeing her do that made Omi realize it was all his fault for not stopping when she told him to yesterday. He scolded himself in his head, knowing he needed to think about how he'd acted. The memory of what happened kept replaying in his mind, making his hands shake because it felt way too embarrassing. He couldn't help but remember how hot Naniko's body was, but quickly forced himself to stop thinking about it any further. He reminded himself that Naniko's job as a spy was to watch him, get close to him, and gather important secrets. Omi tried to push all those thoughts away and focus on his work for the day, but it was no use. He just couldn't concentrate with her sitting so close. Still wanting her attention, Omi had no idea what to say, so he blurted out that he was just glad she was alive. Naniko looked at him, confused, not sure what he meant by that strange comment. But Omi kept talking, telling her that eating well, sleeping enough, and staying active would help her live a good life. Suddenly, he called her name and said she was his beautiful wife. He couldn't hold back anymore and softly touched her cheek. Naniko, surprised, quickly turned her face away. When Omi noticed how annoyed she seemed by his actions, it suddenly hit him. Maybe Naniko wasn't just mad, but actually starting to hate him. Worried, he gently asked if she was all right. Naniko said she was fine and explained that she was just surprised by how sudden his action was. Inside, Omi blamed himself for everything, thinking it was all because of how he acted the day before and wishing he had more self-control. Right then, Naniko told Omi it was time to go, but he paused and asked if she wanted to eat breakfast first. She said she'd just grab something outside. With a more serious voice, he asked if she was going to make her mission report that day. She answered yes and asked if he had a problem with that. Omi told her he'd be out all day and suggested she take the spare key. He also mentioned the weather looked cloudy and tried to remind her to take an umbrella, but Naniko walked out before he could finish. Once outside, Naniko looked up and saw that the sky really did look like it was about to rain. Annoyed, she realized she'd rushed out and forgotten her umbrella. She decided she'd just have to buy one at the nearest shop. As she walked, the sound of a power bike caught her ear from behind. When she turned around, she saw Omi sitting on the bike, looking like a bargain version of Tom Cruise. Surprised, she asked what he was doing there. Omi just grinned and said he had finally found her. Naniko was shocked and thought Omi must have come all this way just to stop her from giving out the information. However, Omi handed her an umbrella, which caught Naniko off guard. He said he saw the umbrella on his way out and thought she might need it. Then he teased that it matched her cuteness perfectly. Naniko was surprised and really thankful for his kindness. She asked in shock if he really came all that way just to bring her an umbrella, even though she could have just bought one herself. Naniko was even more surprised that he was thinking about her, especially after how rude she'd been to him all day. Feeling touched, she called Omi by a sweet nickname and told him he was spoiling her too much. But Omi told her he did it because he wanted to, and then finally apologized for how aggressive he'd been the day before. Naniko said she forgave him and would let it all go. Omi was about to leave on his bike when Naniko suddenly grabbed his shirt and, blushing, told him she wouldn't be upset anymore. Her face turned bright red as she admitted it was all her fault and apologized to Omi. She said she felt really guilty, which was why she'd been mad at herself. Hearing this, Omi got emotional and suddenly hugged her, telling her there was no way he could ever stop loving her. He suggested they cancel their plans for the day and just stay home so he could take care of her. He promised to feed her all sorts of tasty food until her stomach was totally full. Even though Naniko liked the idea, she reminded him that she still had to go to work. Omi agreed, but offered to give her a ride to the organization on his bike. Naniko, a bit curious, asked if he even knew where it was, and Omi said he did. Before she got on, Omi handed her a cute helmet he'd bought just for her, which made her feel emotional. She put it on, got on the bike, and held onto Omi tightly, feeling a bit nervous. Shortly afterwards, Naniko made it to the spy organization. Inside, she met with her boss, who brought up her marriage to the target and said the first step was now done. But Naniko quickly mentioned that the target, Omi, used to be part of the organization. She said she wanted to know more about Omi's past with them. The boss, however, warned her that if she didn't give her report right away, he'd have to start questioning her loyalty to the organization. Furious, Naniko asked if the boss was testing her because she was an amateur spy. The boss responded, reminding her that her target was a dangerous individual, and then warning her not to let her emotions take over her heart just because they were temporarily married. However, Naniko assured him that she was already aware of that. That said, the boss told Naniko it was time for her next mission. He handed her 2 tickets and explained that she needed to get even closer to Omi and find out all his secrets. Naniko was confused at first, not sure what the tickets were for. The boss then explained that the tickets were for a honeymoon with Omi, and her job was to get him to let his guard down. Naniko was shocked by the idea. But what really stunned her was when the boss said that if Omi lost focus during the honeymoon, she would have to terminate him right away. Will Naniko agree to embark on this deadly mission? Comment, "The Assassin Cinderella," if you're excited to see what happens next in Part 2. If you enjoyed the story, smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for content like this. As always, thanks for watching.